Hey, hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Rohan and I would be the moderator for today's exciting event. I would firstly like to thank you for taking the time to attend the EdTech Power Hour session hosted by Harbinger. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Power Hour is a series of interactive roundtable discussions amongst industry stalwarts where they would be sharing their experiences and insight on a particular topic. So the topic for today's discussion would be virtual reality to skill, upskill, and reskill the workforce of future. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping tips. In case you cannot hear the audio, ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. You may test this to see if it is working fine from the audio settings option on the lower left corner of your screen. And if necessary, please dial in using a phone. With that, now it's time for introduction. Our host for today's roundtable is Rahul Singh. Rahul is a digital learning enthusiast and is passionate about helping organizations and leaders solve challenges around learner engagement and student outcomes through intervention of learning technologies. In a career span of over 15 years in the digital learning space, he has helped a host of global organizations and educational institutions in implementing new initiatives around the digital learning strategy. We welcome you, Rahul, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Rohan, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this insightful discussion today. We are looking forward to it. We want this to be an interactive session, so at any point of time, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, please feel free to type them in the chat box or in the Q&A section. I along with my colleague Rohan and along with our panelists, will take those questions and answer them for you. So we'll begin with introducing or welcoming our panelists for today. So let me, start doing that. And before we introduce our panelists, let's go through the agenda for today in terms of what we are going to cover today. So what we are going to do is we are going to evaluate the role of virtual reality in developing skills for the future. The next one is we'll spend some time understanding how to get a buy-in from stakeholders for implementing VR. Then the third one is, how do we integrate VR into mainstream education so that it does not works or operates in a silo? And then identifying the levers for implementing a scalable VR solution. So this is basically our game plan for today. And with that, let me introduce the panelists for today. We have Jay Schnoor with us. Jay is the co-founder at VEDX Solutions Incorporated. Good morning, Jay. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you. Did you want us each to introduce ourselves? Sorry. Or
yes, absolutely, Jay. Please go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself so that the audience can know you a little better, who you are, what you do.
Sure. So my name is Jay Schnoor, co-founder and COO of VEDX Solutions Incorporated. We are a global design and consultation firm for governments and businesses and educational institutions. Our model is to partner with the institution, anybody that is interested in bringing virtual reality to educate learners, companies or schools. Secondly, we work with universities and high schools in their distance learning program to solve a lot of the problems that online education, traditionally in 2 dimensions and screens, have run into, which is lack of labs, lack of practical skills, engagement, and focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay, for joining us on this session once again, and we are looking forward to having an insightful conversation with you. Before we move forward, let me ask you one question. Is there a virtual campus behind you, Jay?
Yeah, so this is actually a virtual office. It's one of the designs that we've done with Future Tech Labs and Multiverse. They are the architects of this. Any campus design can be put in here, and there's multiple. It's a metaverse. It's an educational metaverse. So you can hook classes in there, language support classes, whatever you want to do, all in virtual reality for practical skills.
Looks pretty neat. Thank you, Jay. All right, so with that, let me take the opportunity to welcome our second panelist for today. Good morning, Wendy. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. Wendy, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, what you do?
My pleasure. So yeah, I'm Wendy Morgan, and I'm the CEO and founder of Shift. We're a virtual reality training and technology company that uses this really cool technology to address some of the world's most pressing social issues. So we have a library of trainings. We focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and upskilling the workforce, particularly focused in healthcare, around infection prevention, donning and doffing of PPE, and preventing hospital-acquired conditions. But we do work with higher ed and as well as hospital systems. And I actually got my start in the K-12 space, helping classroom teachers learn to recognize and mitigate bias in their student interactions to disrupt the, believe it or not, school to prison pipeline, which is a thing. So that's the work that we do. So using a very powerful tool in virtual reality to impact the lives of hopefully many, many people through a very immersive and real life training.
Thank you, Wendy. And I think that's very interesting in terms of using VR as a technology to address social issues. And during our conversation, we'll definitely have a few questions for you there in terms of how VR can play a role in addressing those issues. So looking forward, Wendy, once again, thank you very much for taking the time out for this.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's welcome our third panelist for today. Good morning, Mike. Thank you very much for joining us from Oklahoma today.
Good morning, Rahul. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Mike Christian. I'm from the future, which always makes people smirk slightly, but it's the name we chose and we're sticking with it. We have that name because we originally started out in video games a long time ago. We've been in business for 13 years. In the last 5, we've been heavily involved in virtual reality and augmented reality. And currently we have a platform that we've been using, we've been building for the last 3 years that supports training and education. And we have 2 very diverse things that I'll get into a little more today that we're doing. One of them is building skills for people on the autism spectrum. And the other one is heavy industry equipment training. So on the surface, 2 very different things, but at its core, it's still education and training. So it'll be interesting to talk about that.
Absolutely, Mike. And we'll definitely like to, know a little more about, these 2 different spectrums in terms of training for the specially abled people and then training for the workforce. So once again, thank you very much, Jay, Wendy, Mike, for joining us today. So let's kind of begin our discussion today. So I just wanted to take a moment and draw our attention to the skills for the future. In the last, I guess, 3 to 4 years, there has been a lot of talk around, how the future workplaces would look like, what are the skills of the future that is required. And then probably early 2020, there came a curveball, the pandemic. And what it did was it primarily accelerated the needs and the requirements. They were supposed to come like, a couple of years down the line, down the road, but suddenly they were like, in our face. And, we had to have those skills because the future workplace was already there. So we are looking at the top 10 work skills of the future. So the World Economic Forum published this report, and I've kind of segregated them into 4 quadrants: problem solving, self-management, working with people, technology use, and development. Now, if we look at these 4 components, 4 quadrants, the 3 quadrants, problem solving, self-management, working with people, they are primarily social skills and soft skills. And the tech skills part of it is 1 quadrant, that's 25%. Definitely, we are not trying to undermine the importance of the technical skills here, But what this report says is the need for the social skills or the soft skills has been constantly on the rise, constantly on the increase. So we'll try to address this question in our discussion in terms of, and with that, I think I have the first question for you, Jay, in terms of what role do you foresee for VEDX in shaping up the workforce for future? Hey, Jay, you might want to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, I was saying myself and the other co-founders come from a background of international education. We've had 10 plus years of experience in 52 countries that we've all traveled throughout. And one of the pieces that we saw a lot, especially with distance education, is with distance education, the student doesn't have a chance to do those participate in labs or practical skills. And I see virtual reality really being a key piece of providing that and solving that problem for virtual education. We came together really to lead the transformation in education and bring together virtual reality companies that were doing really interesting things in the world and bring those to schools. Because one thing as far as when I think about the work skills of the future and the engagement of students in their education, we have a traditional education model, and kids, even students today, the next generation called Generation Alpha, is demanding through their attention and engagement really a more hybrid model of education. They're going to be the most educated generation in the history. They're tech savvy. AI is their reality. They've grown up with machine learning as a concept around them. And now is the convergence for educational institutions to embrace this, understand it, and build it into their curriculum to enhance the learning, not change the curriculum, and prepare them a lot for those problem-solving skills you were talking about, and a lot of the social skills, because we're losing engagement from traditional education. And so we need to revamp how we're teaching those kids.
Right. Thank you, Jay, for sharing those thoughts there. I think the point that you mentioned about Gen Alpha, that's pretty interesting, because this is the next, these are the folks who will enter into the workforce. And, kind of enabling this VR-enabled technologies to skill them, upskill them, reskill them, or make them use, so that once they pass on through their schools and they get into colleges or vocational studies and then into the actual workplace, they are prepared for it. So this is very interesting, and thank you very much for sharing this thought. Now, Wendy, we'll come to you, and the question that I wanted to ask you is, how is Shift leveraging VR to empower the workforce with skills and confidence? The important point over here is I wanted to understand a little bit in terms of the confidence part, the skills part. Okay, we understand, but how do you do it for the confidence part of it?
Yeah, an excellent question. So, when you think about someone graduating high school or even college, and we focus particularly on historically marginalized groups and particularly like women in STEM. So having the skill set to go in and present your work, or to have a group interview, or be, in a conference, perhaps. I mean, even me, I do these little panels all the time, and there's still that nervousness. But where do you practice, right, in a safe space where you can fail and you can mess up, and your tech can, like your internet doesn't work, and yet be able to recover from that and still answer the questions. And when you think about your first time entering the workforce, how traumatic that first interview is. I'm sure we can all think back a couple of years to that. And so if you were able to go into virtual reality and recreate that, I mean, VR is the only place on earth where you can be in a space completely and utterly. I mean, it overtakes your whole perception set. And so you're in that space and you can do your presentation or have the interview and mess up and flub, and you can do that over and over again. And then by the time it really matters and there's high risk, you have that confidence and you're like, oh, I can do this. Oh, I forgot that line. That's okay. I'll just mention it later in the interview. And so, and having been on the flip side and interviewing candidates, that nervousness, your mind wants to say, oh, it's okay, it's just nerves. But when you go to evaluate a suite of candidates, those that are very nervous tend to score lower in your mind. And so being able to build that confidence to present who you are and what you're capable of will make a huge difference for those entering the workforce, whether they're looking for a new job or improving their circumstances in their work.
That sounds so familiar, Wendy. I totally agree with you. I think even for people like us who get on the screen day in and day out, but every time you do it, you have those little nerves and those kind of feelings. And I still recall the days when I got into the workforce, and there wasn't this much of technology available or the social media stuff so that you can keep yourself updated. And it was tough. It was really tough getting those interviews done, and so virtual reality environment that allows you to fail, with confidence. I think that's what we are referring to here. And if I may just add one more question to this, because that's pretty intriguing. I wanted to kind of a little bit understand in terms of what specific things are you doing in the healthcare space in terms of how you're helping in developing skills there in that particular domain.
So we have things like the donning and doffing of personal protective equipment, which has been a big issue and continues to be a big issue because doing that correctly is a high risk, right? If you're not washing your hands properly, if you're taking off your mask by holding it on the front, these are things that can cause you to get an infection. And so being able to put that in VR and practice it and do it wrong and then get corrected and know the right way before you're in a high risk environment. Then the other thing that we look at is the health equity, which is actually a massive issue. And the pandemic has brought that to the forefront as well. So the care of historically marginalized groups is lower. And so while we do the technical skills like putting in an IV line or a catheter and making sure those are done correctly, we also wrap in the skills of are you giving equitable care to all of your patients despite an unconscious bias on your part? And so I say we kind of wrap that in like your vegetables and your mac and cheese for the kids. So they're getting that and they're learning that. And at the same time, it's like, oh yes, but I'm learning how to do these technical skills that I have to have for my job. And so that's the way that we're able to advance health equity, improve patient care, and also create continuity of care.
Thank you, Wendy. That's pretty commendable. And I would personally like to congratulate you and thank you for thinking in this direction in terms of equitable care with unconscious bias. I think we all need to, look into that and take care of that. So thank you again. So, right. So moving ahead, my next question is for Mike. And so Mike, what plans does From the Future has for developing skills in the workforce of future? I think you have been in the industry for so long, right? You started doing things, the video game stuff, and then gradually moving into virtual reality and things. So as the name says, From the Future. So what do you have for the future?
Thank you, Ro. I'm super excited. It keeps me awake at night, but in a good way. There's just so much to think about and so many things to do. What we've done is we've built this platform, our Drive platform, and we have some VR software that sits on top of it called the HoloLab, and we've streamlined education, and now we're using it in some different areas. So this is like second or third generation VR training that we have implemented. Back in the old days, it was 360 video and hotspots, then it got more interactive. You had tethered, now you have the mobile headsets with room scale. So the tech friction is a lot lower. Suddenly you can now give a classroom full of people headsets and have, we got some classroom software that monitors that and evaluates how they're doing in real time, as well as, reporting it to a learning management system or other database. And what we've done is we've taken that system and applied it to construction and oil and gas, heavy industry. And from that, we've learned how to interact in VR. So you've got switches and knobs and levers and gears and hoses and all sorts of things. And there's a lot of technical challenges with that on top of the educational ones. And what that's done, it's let us get a very good feel for how to interact with stuff. Your first idea is to do it in a realistic manner, but that is not good. If you grabbed a switch in a realistic manner and looked away to see something else that needs your attention, your hand's gonna just slip off of it and it's not gonna connect right. So you've got to assist in grabbing things. And so you put your hand on a joystick or a switch and you allow a disconnect from your real hand and the virtual hand, and it feels, and what you find is it's very intuitive, despite how it might sound. So, but it allows, it eliminates the frustration that might exist from doing stuff realistically. And then on the other end, with the autism skills development, it's a very nice surprise as we've started developing that curriculum, because it's at that level, you're talking about the foundations of learning and what it means to learn. So some of that skills building is things like visual perception, which some people have trouble saying, oh, that chair looks like that chair. So at one level, they don't even, they can't even identify that a chair is a chair, matches that chair, or, a table, or even, a dog or a car. And so it really forces one to break down and say, what is learning at its most fundamental level? And some of the discoveries have been that part of teaching, especially when it comes to more abstract things like math or computational or systems thinking, is that in VR, you can still immerse them in this hands-on learning and this engaging that generation alpha, as Jay says, is going to demand of us. Because what you can do is suddenly you can have these visualizations, you can engage them with sight and sound and color and a little bit of haptics, even with the most basic controllers. So one quick example, Rahul, is in teaching a person about the number system. You can give each number different colors, and it's kind of drawn on Montessori learning as well. You can give them different colors. If they pick up a number and look at it, you can have particle effects come off that, like pick up the number 3, you've got 3 particle effects, they're all in the same color. You throw it, you find out, hey, the velocity of the number 3 doesn't go as far as, if I throw a number 9. So you're engaging all these, as much as you can. And so depending on the student, they're going to pick up one or more of those things and learn it more fully. And then you can start getting into complex numbers and fractions, and then even imaginary numbers. Who here can imagine an imaginary number? When I try to picture it, I just picture the square root of -1, and that's not very helpful for me. I still don't know, everything an imaginary number can do. But if we can start to visualize some of that stuff in a virtual environment where we're engaged, it's just going to blow the lid off education. So yeah, that's why I stay awake at night, Rahul.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And I can feel it. I can feel the passion that you have and the good cause that you're serving. In fact, the way you described of teaching the number system, I think that's one thing which people should take a note of it. And, it just changes the entire dynamics. I mean, kids are sitting in front of computers. There's, it's not their age to, do Zoom meetings and understand what a number system is on a Zoom. So I think that's one interesting area, and thank you for doing that. And now I agree with you in terms of why you call it from the future, because you mentioned a term, a sentence, and I'll call that out. You said back in the old days, there were 360-degree videos. And trust me, there's a very small population who would agree that, 360-degree videos and back in the old days go together. So yeah, so just wanted to kind of share that. So thank you for your thoughts on this. All right, so so the next question for our panelists. So can VR play a bigger a more mature and a more significant role in skilling, reskilling, and upskilling the workforce of future. So my first question is for Jay, and basically I want to understand, Jay, is that how VR can be integrated into mainstream education, because right now the mainstream education is supposed to, uh, you know, is the assembly line, if I may say, for the future workforce. But how can we integrate virtual reality in the mainstream education?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. I think, and it's not just VR, right? VR is here now, and the term VR, XR, all of these will converge, and we will laugh. We'll look back and say, "Wow, we put those huge headsets on our heads." It was like when we had those huge cell phones. They'll get smaller, but it is here to stay. And integrating it into mainstream education, we say mainstream. It is, like you said, an assembly line that was today's version was done in the Industrial Revolution. And I think XR and VR is the refabrication of that today. And partnering, VEDX Solutions, when we formed it, we found great companies like From the Future and Shift out there doing some amazing work in their spaces. But many universities, many colleges, high schools, they're not aware of it because they don't have somebody out there searching down how to revamp this industrial education. So we put VEDX together to partner with folks like From the Future and Shift and bring them together for the needs of a school. And I think what it's going to take is, from COVID, it's just accelerated and pushed educators into this kind of reformation. And that is good. But the next step is to really understand what's out there from each school has different needs. There are some schools, Marymount and Bogota, Colombia, that we're consulting with, Panama, we're consulting with the government. Each one is different in what they're going to bring to the school, whether it's healthcare or heavy machinery or special needs. And so I think what it's going to take is for the schools to realize that this is here to stay, that they have a new generation of learners coming up, and to find ways to integrate XR, VR, MR into their curriculum. Because we don't go to schools and say, oh, you need to write new curriculum. No, we say, okay, you've got your curriculum, you've got your way of teaching. We have falling engagement across the world in traditional education. Now we're going to supplement, enhance, and your students are going to fall in love with learning again. And mainstream education needs to realize that falling in love with learning is how we're going to build those skills needed for when they graduate.
Thank you, Jay, for sharing those thoughts. And I think, the point that you made about not changing the curriculum, but blending it within the curriculum, would it be fair to say that that's one way to get a buy-in from the stakeholders to, integrate VR in the education system?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of our mission as far as a company, is bringing all of these great software, VR software companies together in a solution for a school. And it might require 2 or 3 different solutions. You've got STEM classes, you've got companies focused on chemistry. And so we bring those into the professor or learning development and say, what part of this do you want to enhance? You want a frog dissection lab from Victory XR? Do you want some heavy machinery training from the Future? Do your professors need to take a unconscious bias class from Shift? So it's really about putting pieces in for that particular school's needs.
Right. Thank you, Jay. That makes total sense. Right. So moving ahead to our next question. So Wendy, I always debate in my mind and with my colleagues and other L&D stakeholders, decision makers, in terms of, is there a substitute for in-person training? Okay, there's digital learning, there's blended training, everything. but can VR be a good substitute? And can it fill in the gaps or the voids that could be created by just implementing a plain digital learning or a plain blended learning solution?
Yeah, so substitute, I would say no, because many people learn in different ways. And yes, we are moving forward, and there are a lot of learners, including my 16-year-old son, who only want to be online, but there are those among us who that's just never going to be the way they can take in information. But the enhancement, the ability to go further. So one of the big topics we're looking at is that the nurses themselves, there's not a lot of diversity. And so how do you bring more people into the nursing field? Well, you've got internships, right? But that's not available to certain groups of people. So, but putting VR out there, we can do an internship, a day in the life, and they can explore, whether it's nursing or heavy machinery or any of those things, having those VR headsets in the schools or in their homes, they can see, oh, this is a potential career and this is a potential career, or I really like this field, but the only career I'm aware of in that field is this one thing. And so exposure to more options for their future is a great way. I think that could substitute a lot of things. And then enhancing, like what Mike is saying about, some students, when I was a classroom teacher, they had to have something that they interacted with. And so writing it on the board or reading it in a book, you would just never get it. And VR is sticky, right? We have students who go through and, people have tried to train them over and over and they just don't quite get it. And then 10 minutes in VR, they've instantly got it memorized. And because they learn a different way and having that engagement and interaction, and it's their entire world. As I said earlier, there's nothing else going on except this thing that they're engaged in. And so, students with alternately able learning, they need that. They need being closed off from the rest of the world to focus. So enhancement, yes, absolutely. I would hesitate to say substitute because that could raise alarm bells. Wait, we're going to not have classrooms? No, don't tell me that. So yes, absolutely can incredibly enhance the existing and what will ever come out of this pandemic for our schools going forward. Some students won't want to go back. So how do we reach them where they are?
Right. Thank you, Wendy. That makes sense. And that's very, very thoughtful in terms of, no, it cannot be a substitute, but it can be a very good complement or supplement to the existing system. And I like the point that you mentioned about the internship, the apprenticeship. I think if those are the things, a portion of the curriculum, if I may say, can be developed in VR rather than having the entire stuff in VR, and bring in those specific competencies or skills in the workforce, that would be very helpful. And also in terms of stickiness, I think PricewaterhouseCoopers strongly agrees with your viewpoint. They say there's a report that says the VR content, the learners who experience VR content are 2.3 times more emotionally connected to the content as compared to students consuming plain digital learning. So that's the stickiness parameter or the measuring parameter for them. So thank you, Wendy, for sharing those thoughts.
And if I could add just very quickly, it's faster. I mean, you learn 4 times faster in VR. And so for those students who really just want to be done with school and go to work, learning some of these skills or onboarding, it's incredible how much faster it can be done.
Thank you. So all the talent managers and the chief learning officers who are trying to grapple with the skill shortage, the talent shortage, if you heard Wendy, I think you can, if you implement VR into your system, in your training systems, you can, train people at a faster rate and probably in a more effective manner. So something for us to think about. So thank you, Wendy, for sharing that data point. Right. So, Mike, looks like we have a pretty lengthy question for you. So, with your company's background on building training over the years, how has VR driven that forward for the practical skill development? And the second part of the question is that, what kind of growth have you seen in this industry in relations to skills? So, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, sorry, I had to move locations, so I'm not sure what what all you're seeing on video. Yeah, and I've alluded to this a little bit, and I did mention that, in the old days, we did 360 video, but that was just to say that was when the hardware is a little more limited. That was what naturally a lot of people did. It's still very useful for a lot of things, particularly some of the soft skills development. But what we've seen over the years is that some of the things I mentioned before, we have this evolution and these discoveries that keep happening along the way. And what we've also seen is that the fact that we have the mobile hardware right now is big. Once the Oculus Go came out and the HTC Vive Focus, that immediately told me, even though the Go wasn't 6 degrees of freedom yet, that told me that, oh, this is here to stay now. And then Walmart, purchased 17,000 headsets and got training from Striver for soft skills, and that was even just further proof. So at that point in time, I knew that it was here to stay, and so we kept, because of our gaming background, we were more interested in full immersion and interaction. And even though that was part of our arsenal to do 360 and it suited a purpose, we realized there was even more challenges and interesting problems to solve, and the potential for even more profound effect to just get involved with heavy interaction. And now today's headsets with the Quest 2, the new Vive Focus they just announced, the Pico Neo 2, and then the 3's coming out, you're talking about, and some really nice resolution and some nice processing power on these headsets. And I think the technical part of it is the easy part. And I think what we really need now is people putting their heads together on both sides, from content creators to end users, because you need those subject matter experts and you need the iteration. So what our challenge is now is creating this content. Because if you think about it, even traditional content has always been a little lacking. From PowerPoints to computer-based training, there's been some really good stuff, but that's always been a challenge in itself. Now we're in a virtual world where we're trying to recreate simulations of what's going on. In some cases, we're inventing new things, like, how does a genius imagine physics? How do we capture that? Because it's there's probably get research involved, but at some point we might be able to teach. Yeah, Rahul, you might be able to take a course and suddenly come out a super genius. That's you're probably already one, Rahul, but you know what I'm saying. It's there's this opportunity here for now the air conditioning's coming on. There's an there's an opportunity here for just some next level stuff, and I love being in the middle of that. All right, I'm gonna stop talking now.
Right. Thank you, Mike, for sharing these thoughts. And for any reasons, if you want to switch off your video for some time, that's perfectly fine. That's the new normal working these days. Since we are working from home and all. So and actually this let's take a quick pause here and let's take a few questions. There are a few questions that have come up in the chat box. Okay, so the first question that we have is, do we foresee the cost of VR technology becoming affordable for education applications? And Jay, do you want to take that, or share some thoughts on that question?
Sorry, unmute there. I think all three of us would have some input there. One of the things that we first encounter when we're talking to schools is they perceive VR to be this really prohibitive cost, and it's not something it's not something they feel like they can afford. But I think what we found after partnering with schools is that they can do a light dip in the water and do a software license for some content that's already available out there. And like Mike was saying, the more content that's produced, matching national curriculum standards, enhancing chemistry and biology, the laboratories, those then become licensable like a textbook. And those content libraries are becoming more and more prolific. I mean, Victory XR is just going crazy with creating content for high school curriculum, and it's just amazing to watch. And I can't wait to see what every day there's new content coming out there that can be applied to curriculum. And I'm excited to partner with a textbook provider, and hopefully if any of you listening out there for textbook providers, I'd like to see a tech book come out for XR, where it blends traditional curriculum and the XR into a new type of tech book, content ready, licensable. Here we go with the headsets that Mike was talking about. And secondly, if there are headset providers out there listening, please continue to make your headsets available in countries globally. And so anyway, the affordability, many institutions are surprised when they actually dig in with us in terms of a consultation, and they're like, oh, wow, I can do this Immerse Me program for language support at a really low cost per student, and it's available on all platforms. Great. So that's how we start. We start the conversation. That's all I encourage people to do, is start the conversation.
Right. Thank you, Jay, for sharing those thoughts. And in fact, this alludes us to our next question. We were going to discuss in our panel in terms of what obstacles, and personally myself as well, I've heard about this in terms of the hardware being an obstacle in terms of being affordable to everyone. So Wendy, any thoughts there in terms of how is it shaping up? Have you seen any trends in the healthcare industry? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so when I first started the company, that was right. It felt like an obstacle, and we were developing on the HTC Vive, and it felt to me like an obstacle. You've got the big computer and the headset and the towers, and so many things can go wrong. But now it's just not. In fact, many of my sales conversations and deployment conversations, it doesn't even come up. They're just like, oh, tell me about how you developed your content and who's on your panel, and then like, oh yeah, and let me know where the headsets are. So it's not even, because the price, the price point is plenty low. And then you think about, okay, you're purchasing a thing, but how many thousands of hours of training can you get out of that one piece of equipment? And it's as easy to operate as your cell phone. So yeah, I've seen a complete flip even just in the last year. And so in healthcare, they are saying this is a non-negotiable technology. It's must have right now. And so, that space is growing rapidly. And we do have clients, again, as I said, in higher ed and K-12, and even they are not bothered by it. Now, when you talk about deployment to the student body, there are some obstacles to overcome. You've got your age limit and things like that. But still, the pricing and the acceptability of the technology has come late years in just the past year.
Right. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing that. That's encouraging news. Looks like there could be more Walmarts out there looking forward to implementing at a large scale. And Mike, with these multiple players coming in the headset market, this hardware market, is it becoming relatively easier because of more people contributing to it?
Yes. So like our company has seen the challenges with costs, because if you're talking about full-blown simulated worlds, that's expensive to develop. So naturally people have a concern about that. So at the other end of the spectrum, what you want to do is pull in existing content and being able, whether it's digitizing, slides, or taking, current computer-based training and pulling it in. And immediately, even as is in VR, you've got a captive audience and a little bit more engaging. And then what you start doing is layering in mini lessons and mini interactions with the content. And then in some cases, depending on the curriculum, you might have a full-blown simulation, whether it's heavy equipment or throwing around mathematical numbers. So yeah, it's been it's been fascinating to look at that. And the mobile headsets, you know, like what we've said, has just blown the doors off. And what I think is really helpful in these systems is to have, you know, be able to support classrooms and to also support third-party software. So, you know, it's going to take all of us. It's an all hands on deck, and we're all going to be busy for a very long time. But you don't want to deliver a completely different system in a classroom for every subject. One person's not going to be able to develop everything, but you could have a generic system deliver content from diverse providers just by wrapping it up, having them use the same backend and management system, having them talk to the same classroom management software. And I think that's how we solve one of the problems, is just, you know, different ways of doing things. If we can all agree to, you know, use some common platforms to deliver this stuff, I think that's how we get more acceptance.
Right. Thank you for sharing that thoughts. There are a couple of other questions which I was feeling like we should take it. The first one is, are you considering, or would you be open to working with Ministry of Educations in developing VR content?
Absolutely. We're already doing that in Panama, and talks in Colombia, and talks in Brazil. So absolutely, that's what we are specializing in. And as Mike said, if there's everybody's working on their specific niche of content, and as we grow together, you know, Harbinger, as Rahul, how we met, is developing an APIX to integrate into LMS systems globally. And if you combine that with this metaverse idea put out by Future Tech Labs, you start to get sort of this hub, this portal, this process where you can bring in multiple providers into a space for a school. Student starts in the lobby, and they can use various VR places. And you know, it's such an important point you made there, Mike, because no school, no ministry wants to work with 5 different VR companies, 5 different payment systems, 5 different contracts from all over the world, which is where the best companies are. It's best just to have somebody bring those together in an ecosystem. And that's I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited for this next year.
Thank you, Jay, for sharing those thoughts. I think if it gets at a policy level, where the education frameworks are designed and defined, the collaboration at that level will go a long way in helping the future workforce. I think there's one more question here, and I'll read that question out. So the question says, how about supporting measurement of brain waves and physical activity? So is that a possibility within the virtual reality domain?
Yes. We're, even where I live in Denton, Texas, and we have the University of North Texas. And they're very heavy into AI and VR. And one of the researchers, Dr. Parsons, he's been studying that exact same thing. And it has nice crossover. And I don't know the specific headsets, but I know I have seen some news with some of the headsets that do record brainwaves. And I think the integration of those, especially when we're talking about multiple ways of learning inside of VR and what's effective and what's not, or, you know, if content's effective or what's not, that's one really lovely way to know, you know, what they're engaged and how they're engaged. So I definitely see that being part of our future.
That sounds very interesting, Mike, and thank you very much for sharing those thoughts. When I was listening to you, you know, a couple of scenes from the movie X-Men went across my mind, and you know, so that looks like a reality. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so thank you very much, audience, for asking those wonderful questions. Please keep them coming, and we'll go back to our presentation here. So I'll start sharing my screen again here. Okay. Right. So now I wanted to request our panelists to share their 2 cents on if an educational institution or an enterprise who are contemplating whether to VR or not to VR, if you had to give them an advice, what would you tell them? And we can start from Wendy.
We'll absolutely have to. So, I mean, previously it was like, yes, we highly believe in this, but there's a lot of research now. And you mentioned the Pricewaterhouse thing that came out, and there's the learning outcomes are higher, that the time that's spent training is lower, and then the cost is significantly lower. So, unfortunately, even for us and our work around social issues and trying to improve lives of people, there's still the deciding point is the dollar, right? How much is this going to cost us? And so looking at the ROI, the return on investment for virtual reality. So we have a subscription base. We've got a library of training. You say one headset can take the place of a full-time FTE plus, but particularly in healthcare, the training take place during working hours. So you've got to have the nurse off the floor plus the nurse educator off the floor. So the investment dollars in virtual reality are significantly lower than what they're already spending. Plus, if you've got students, nurses, anyone who just isn't quite getting the content, then you can know that after one training, the chances that they will be able to apply what they've learned go up by like 200%. So it's an absolute yes, not just because I'm in this space, but the data and research are there.
Thank you, Wendy, for sharing those thoughts. Jay, you want to share your advice, your thoughts on this?
Sure. VR, XR, my advice is be aware there are many institutions as they come out of COVID heavily investing in going forward with XR to drive not only their own upskilling, but also their enrollments, because instances like Snow College out there, University of North Texas, Stanford, Colorado, these are all universities that we've spoken with that are going forward full steam in different departments and working on virtual reality and XR to see how to enhance their upskilling, their career network inside of their university, saving money, like Wendy said, on the investment. Instead of buying that robotic 20 robots for introduction to robotics, we can build a robotics lab and have those kids go through it again and again and again, saving departments money and offering them the opportunity to advertise to the world that you can come here and take VR, or you can come here and take robotics in person, or you can start with some practical experience before you even get here in one of their classes. So innovative models are emerging, and they're emerging quickly, hybrid for practical skills. And I guess the second thing I would say is be a pioneer. I mean, this isn't going away. It's not a gimmick. It's going to absolutely transform education. And I got to give it to EC, who is the largest English and travel company in the world. They are going full steam ahead with their virtual reality language building skills and tours for youth across the world. And so I'm excited to see where that goes. And just know that lots of schools are going forward. And if you think things are going to return to the old way, you might find yourself trying to catch up in a couple of years. So yeah, I would say get a hold of us.
Thank you very much, Jay. That's a wonderful advice. And I think you brought a very valid point in terms of VR and robotics. So it's not just the investment part that we have to think about. We should also consider what kind of savings are we making there. And probably that's one of the reasons that why technologies like AI and VR are getting a lion's share of investment in the edtech domain as compared to robotics and some of the other technologies. And probably who better than Mike would be able to vouch on this fact in terms of does robotics have an upper hand, or has VR got an upper hand, or they combine together to create a impactful scenario?
It depends on what problems you're trying to solve. So in some cases, I think robotics are in danger. I'm thinking more of a robot, and I apologize if any of you people are listening, but there's a robot that helps interact with children and does facial expressions, and it's wonderful. And that probably still serves a portion of the population, especially younger and that are adverse to putting a headset on. But in a headset, as you all know, the character complexity and the interaction can be much more elaborate. And I think, you know, if it was a head-to-head competition, the VR would win. But in some cases, they're complementary. We did a therapeutic back injury type study where you were on a robotic treadmill. So the treadmill itself had a smart robotic arm that would catch you and support you, but it also acted like a giant joystick, and you could control it with your waist. And we created a VR simulation to go with it, where you were a warrior in a fantasy realm. You had a sword and a shield, and you walked on this treadmill. So you were completely distracted while you were exercising and having your lower back pain rehabilitated. So I think in some cases it's complementary, and in some cases it gets beat out. It just really depends on the particular problem we're trying to solve.
Right. Thank you, Mike, for sharing those thoughts there. We have another question, and I thought we'll take this question. What are some resources for instructional designers who want to learn how to develop and incorporate XR into training programs? Pretty interesting one. We have been talking about the tech part of it, the platform part of it. Here comes the content. So how do we address this? So any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts because I work a lot with designers from the video game industry where I came from. And so there are some similarities. So I believe that a creative, curious person that wants to learn will learn. The best way to do it is to just start creating, get a VR headset, play a lot of games, do a lot of experiences, try to learn yourself, try to learn a language. Then depending on what industry you're in or what particular set of issues you're trying to walk on, then you try to extrapolate, you know, how would I simulate that? Okay, you know, the first thought that comes in people's minds, I'm going to simulate it exactly. Well, that's not always the best way to learn. Simulated and exactly might be frustrating. Like in an exact job simulation, you might have a lot of time where you're just walking. Well, you're not learning very much while you're walking. So let's get to where we need to solve the problem. You know, and so you start to discover what the design challenges are in VR. So I think a lot of the traditional creative curriculum, I think you could come from just about any of the arts or you know, art school, or even programmers. Anybody that's creative can get into this. It's a really good opportunity. There's no super fixed curriculum that I'm aware of. So I think if you've got a passion and you're out there to learn, and you've got a very inquisitive mind, and you're a systems thinker, so maybe going to system thinking school is a good is a good one. You know, if you've got the ability to look at stuff in big picture and see how things work, then you're perfect for it.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing that. So we are coming towards the end of the session. So I wanted to take this opportunity and once again thank our wonderful panelists for today, Jay, Wendy, Mike. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules and having this wonderful conversation with us.
Thank you. It was fun to be here. Great conversation. Nice to meet all the other panelists as well.
Yes, thank you, Rahul, and lovely meeting you, Wendy. And I've known Jay for a while. It's nice to see you again, Jay.
You too. It's great. This industry, and one final closing remark is, if you're interested, reach out. We are a really collaborative industry overall. Most of us are working together just to bring this into education and skills and the workforce. And it's going to require all of us working together to do that.
Absolutely. It requires everyone to come together, work towards the cause for the society. It's not just about the skill development, but it's about the overall development of our future generations. And all of us should come together, collaborate. You have the names on your screens for our wonderful panelists today. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn. And if you want to reach out to Harbinger to try and understand in terms of how we can help you in your product development journeys or integrating your products, making them talk to each other, we are there to help you. And, you know, I wish we had another 30 minutes scheduled for this wonderful discussion, but like all good things, this one also has to come to an end. But we can continue this conversation. Please do drop us a line if you have any specific questions, comments. And if we feel that, you know, there is a need for having a follow-up conversation on this, we'll set it up accordingly. And from me and from Harbinger, and we again thank you, the audience, the panelists, for joining us for this wonderful discussion. Wishing everyone a very happy weekend coming ahead, and stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.